How's it going, everybody? So, got the theme, a glorious day. I figured, like, glorious day. I don't know if I have a story about a glorious day, because I just was, I couldn't think of anything. But then I started thinking, well, what is a glorious day? And I think it's a day when something big happens, like like even a paradigm shift. Something important happens. Even possibly the beginning of a beautiful friendship, right? So I thought about this story about when the beginning of a friendship between these two very unique people that I know. My cousin Leo and this guy, who was his upstairs neighbor at the time, a guy that we called Tiki Dan. And we call him Tiki Dan because he used to, and still does, he wears like these vintage hats, like fedoras, and he's like very into like 50s kitsch, and and it's particularly like tiki culture, and he collects these things, and he and his wife's apartment is actually like set up like a tiki bar, right? So he's a colorful character. They're both colorful characters, but without each other, they were somehow incomplete. So this is kind of like the story, like, you could almost think about it, it's like the story when Laurel met Hardy, when Abbott met Costello, right? So my cousin Leo, first of all, and I spent a lot of times hanging out with this guy in my formative years. He's older than me, he's like 10 years older than me. And he's the type of person, if you met him, you won't forget him. And like even people who have only met him once or twice, they tell the story about, oh my God, we met this crazy guy one time, right? So I'm trying, like, the way that I could describe him is that he's a Mormon, hippie, Viking. And I mean, if that makes any sense. So you'd really have to meet him to get a sense of this. Like he goes places, and he used to get told by a lot of people he reminded them of Chris Farley in that skit, like, you'll be living in a van down by the river, because he used to kind of look like that and act like that. So he would go places, and he would he's known for like being very boisterous and manic, and he would like give these rants where he would talk about like the Book of Mormon, Jim Morrison from The Doors, which is one of his favorite topics, like First Blood, and like Star Wars, and he would somehow bring them all together, and it's like somehow deeply significant. And so he's not a guy that really fits in society either. Like he doesn't, he has no time for things like getting a job, chewing with his mouth closed, or like watching his language around like old ladies or like young children, right? He has no time for that. And he really is a good guy. He means well, but he's very generous and open-hearted. But everywhere he goes, he just pisses people off. Like I've never met someone who's gotten thrown out of so many places. Like I've been thrown out of many bars with him. He gets thrown out of people's houses on a regular basis. I've thrown him out of my house I don't know how many times. So that's kind of like a background of him. Even animals sense there's something off with him. Like I had a cat who used to just freak out when he was in the room, like start snarling and hissing, and he just throws off this energy. He seems unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen. So there's him, and then there's Dan, who when he met him was like a typical kind, well, not far from typical. He's already into this kitsch, but spent a lot of time with his wife watching TV shows, and his partying days were seemingly long behind him in his college years and things like that. Leo one day shows up to my house, and he's wearing like this ridiculous shirt, like this bright blue shirt, and it has tiki figures on it, and like coconuts and drinks or whatever. And I'm like, dude, what is the deal with this shirt? Like, why are you wearing this shirt? And he's like, yo, can you believe that like I got this shirt in the mail? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I just opened up this package, and I was like, open it, and it's this shirt. I was like, yeah, right? And I was like, so like, what, you won the shirt, or like, you know, like, and he was like, no, it was meant for my neighbor, but they sent it to my house by mistake, you know, and I opened it up, and I'm like, so you're wearing it? And he was like, yeah. I'm like, you know, that's against the law. That's mail tampering. It's a federal offense. He's like, dude, it was mailed to my house, man. And could see nothing wrong with it. He's like, I'll give it to them eventually. So he wore it around, and he like wore it all that week. And of course, he's a wild man. So he wore it to like the bar, and he spilled beer all over it and got like barbecue sauce on it and stuff like that. And meanwhile, while he was wearing this shirt out, like he was leaving his apartment one time, and Dan's wife saw him leaving with the shirt, and it's a very distinctive shirt. You're not going to miss it. And she's like, that's the shirt that Dan ordered that we never got. So she was like, Dan, you should talk to the neighbor about this. So Dan's like, oh, okay, I'll talk to the neighbor. And he's like, excuse me, neighbor, did you get this shirt delivered to your house by accident? And Leo's like, yeah, I got the shirt. Here's the thing, man. Could you give me like a week and I'll get it back to you? And Dan, being like, a very nice guy and everything, he says, yeah, sure. So Leo gets it dry cleaned and everything, and he brings it and he gives it to Dan. And this was like the beginning of their friendship. So Dan was kind of colorful before this, very neurotic. He would take his whole life with him wherever he went, like in a bag. He used to carry he would have everything in this bag. He'd have all kinds of things packed in his trunk. Extremely neurotic. So he's an interesting guy. But like I said, kind of calm, domesticated. Dare I even say pussy whipped. But he meets Leo, and his whole life changes. Right? He becomes a rock and roll outlaw after this point. And so he starts spending all this money on booze and everything. And, we have like these parties at his apartment every night. And, he starts to become alienated from like his old friends and his wife and everything. And it's all started. And he became like Leo's disciple. And his whole life was like focused around Leo and his many, many problems. And so this sets off a chain of events. So within about a year, Dan was arrested twice on two separate occasions. One was he left his bag in a parking lot, and his bag had like a bag of pot in it. And he went to the police station to go pick up this bag. They called him and said, we found your bag, and he went to go pick it up, and he got arrested for that. And the other time was for pointing a squirt gun at his irate neighbor. His neighbor said it was assault. They were, it was a noise thing or whatever. So he ended up entangled up in court cases for a year. And eventually, Leo, Dan, and his poor wife, and their neighbor, Dave, who became their arch nemesis, were all evicted from their apartment. And it all began with this shirt that was accidentally sent to Leo's apartment on this day. So that's the glorious day or fateful day. So that's it. Stromberg.